This is the second conversation of the series of conversation that the festival is hosting this year. We'll have a pleasure to welcome Willem Dafoe, and the conversation will be moderated by Jonah Nazaro. Jonah is the artistic director of the Locarno International Film Festival, and we like this series of conversation to be moderated by our friends who are artistic directors from several film festivals over the world. And today is Jonah. So please welcome Willem Dafoe and Jonah Nazaro.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for showing up. This is a rather unique opportunity to speak with one of the most talented actors working today, who has an extraordinary filmography, and which is also a daunting task in order to where to start approaching the extraordinary trajectory of his career. We will have at the end of the conversation a couple of minutes for questions from the audience, so don't worry about that. And I would say that we start with the very beginning, because I feel that there is a thin red line that goes through the career of Willem, which is the theater. And you started with the Wooster Group in New York, and your whole life has been marked by your love for theaters and experimental theater. So I would really want to begin with that, because I think that's something that sometimes gets overlooked or forgotten.
Just when I started, that was really my identity, and I'm not one of those people that decided or trained necessarily to be an actor. I just went towards situations and groups of people, and that was a time in New York City where you could actually do that. So I went to school briefly, and make a long story short, I ended up in New York and started working with the Wooster Group, which was a small avant-garde theater company. And I was with them for close to 30 years. And that was my day job. And then I wasn't really seeking film work. I was interested in film, but that wasn't my identity. And I didn't know anybody that was really making movies. But then some people saw me at the theater and asked me to be in a movie called The Loveless. And that movie is interesting because it was directed by Catherine Bigelow. It was her first feature film, and she went on to become the first woman to receive an Academy Award for directing a film, and also was co-directed by a man, Monty Montgomery, and he went on to produce for David Lynch, and also memorably played the cowboy in David Lynch's Lost Highway. So that was sort of the beginning. And I thought, I like this. I like this movie thing. I like performing for a camera. I like going someplace with a group of people and making something. So that was really sort of the beginning. There were a couple of things before that, but that's really the beginning.
There is, when it comes down to acting, there are different ways of approaching this cinema acting or theater acting. There are obviously very well-known actors that are famous for their extreme rigor in getting ready for a role. But sometimes once I heard Christopher Walken saying something about that. For him, acting is like playing what he was doing in his backyard, and that's the reason. So for you, when it comes to acting, what is that resonates with you when you need to get ready, and how do you balance between this extreme method, strategy, and the playfulness of Christopher Walken, for example?
I agree with Chris on one hand. On the other hand, sometimes you have to prepare to. Each time it's different, and I think you have to adapt your way of approaching things depending on what your job is and what the project is and who you're working with. So each time you have to reinvent that. I think one thing that's consistent is I always respond. You have to do whatever gives you the authority to feel like you can pretend, you know, the authority to say, I am this guy. And that usually involves having some experiences that give you a parallel history or give you a kind of investment, give you special information, give you a way that triggers your imagination, and you can kind of leave yourself behind and have an experience. And then hopefully that experience is transparent enough that the audience can share it with you and they can have that experience too. But basically, I have no set method, but one thing that is consistent and really comes from my theater background is acting for me is pretending, but it's also doing things. Doing things. That's the root of it. You don't think about emotion, you think about doing things, and as you do things, when you're in movement, I think the emotion comes. So, yeah, I guess the answer is acting is all kinds of things, and you have to be flexible, and you have to adapt to each situation.
Well, since you are speaking about emotions and you have an extremely complex and long and articulated filmography, I would love to show the first clip, which is obviously from Platoon, which has always struck me as kind of ironic that your career took off with one of the most iconic death scenes in the history of cinema. On peut montrer la première clip de Platoon.
I don't like to see myself die, and I die a lot. It's practice, I guess. When the real time comes, I'll say, I got this.
What kind of emotional toll took you to do this kind of scene in a moment where there was still little discussion, debate about the consequences, the plight, the aftermath of the Vietnam War, and obviously the director wanted to portray in your death the whole trauma, tragedy that befell two nations, America and Vietnam, with this almost Christological death that you had to, and it isn't, I would really like to ask you what conversation did you have with Mr. Stone in preparing this moment that has become the iconic moment of the film?
No conversation. Run from here to there. There's going to be explosion here, an explosion there, an explosion there, an explosion there. We're going to be up in helicopters. You, when you're ready, you start off. There's a bunch of background, extras behind you. They're going to chase you. You run like hell, and you detonate your squibs, and you run. You avoid those explosions. And that illustrates, really, that was pure doing. That was running from here to there. But it was conditioned by the situation. And so I didn't think about the effect. I didn't think about the emotion because it's so loaded. The world is complete. It's clear that this you can't do that without imagining your own death or imagining this, the situation this guy is in. So you're not thinking about Vietnam. You're thinking about, this task. And then there's some degree of pretending because you know that you're not really going to die, but you're putting yourself in that imaginary place.
From there, you have somehow developed an intense career. We have said that you're working almost non-stop. I mean, that's the perception that we get from outside. And you have
Rather than
also
hearing I'm a bum.
and you have also developed a certain kind of faithfulness to certain directors. And you love to work with directors more than once, thinking of other directors. And one of the more recent collaborations that have struck is with Robert Eggers. And you are going to retake for Robert Eggers the Nosferatu character that you portrayed so gloriously in The Shadow of a Vampire.
But I don't play the Nosferatu character. I play the Van Helsing character.
Yeah,
and
I
it's
know.
quite a different story, yeah.
Yeah, I know that. But so I wanted to talk to you about the Lighthouse, which is another powerhouse performance of yours, and where you had this elevated language that you managed to, and this is something that is really interesting, but I just want to show first the clip and then you elaborate on that. On peut montrer la deuxième clip? I mean, this is a piece of dialogue that could have been written by Melville and acted by people like Peter O'Toole. I'm thinking of The Lion in Winter. How did you approach this kind of language, this kind of situation, without coming off as a, like self-parody? Because this is heightened realism, almost expressionistic realism. So,
I like the speech. It's full of imagery. It's got a strong action. Basically, I'm cursing him. I'm trying to shrivel him right before my eyes with all this imagery, wishing him this horrible fate. And the language is so rich, and to paint with the language becomes a physical thing. So you're really, it's kind of like running in Platoon. You've got these, you're riding this impulse, and as it's happening, you're leaning on the gas, you're backing off, you're going, it's like a game. And you're concentrated, you have a super consciousness, super concentration, because the language is so rich. And that's my job, to deliver that language and to shrivel him with this speech. So it's a beautifully written speech, and I love doing it. I like the rhythm, the sound of it. So when you come to that, that takes you away from everything else and makes what you're doing, your existence, very specific for a moment. And that's always the beauty of performing, when everything can drop away and you can be, you get an opportunity to have this kind of otherworldly presence. And it's a combination of things coming together. In Platoon, it was the music, it's the shots, all that thing. In this, it's the language, the camera angle, the photography. So you hop on board, and that all comes together, and you ride that wave.
And this film, The Lighthouse, is a piece of resistance. It's basically you and Mr. Pattinson fighting off with this extremely elaborated language. But when it came to this scene, did you know it would be a big day on the set? How many takes did you do it? Or was it just another day in a film that had to be done very quickly? Or
no, it was special, because for this you have to prepare it. Not only, of course, you play with the music of it, so it becomes like a song. So you're going to sing your song that day. And we didn't do a lot of takes. It wasn't the kind of movie that we did a lot of takes. And it's basically, they cut away a lot. I don't remember them. That's not the experience of it. It's basically one shot. I mean, of course, they cut away in the edit, but there's some pressure to keep that speech together and keep the rhythm together and the tone of it together for that long. But yeah, it was a special day, I guess.
You said that
every day is a special day.
We pretty much got this idea. You spoke of color, and in an interview you said that you perceive yourself most of the time as a color in the canvas, which is a very humble thing to say when everybody else is just looking at you and is basically oblivious of what comes before, after, during, and so on. And in the film that you did with Julian Schnabel, Eternity's Gate, where you basically worked with Julian Schnabel, you lived in his studio, and he taught you to paint. How did this idea come together, that you're basically a color in the canvas and a color and a part of a process? Because this is extremely interesting, given that Van Gogh had been already portrayed by Kirk Douglas. Maurice Pialat did a film on him as well. So there was a lot of pressure on that as well, in terms of portraying such a complex character with such an immense legacy.
There's a couple of questions in there. The color thing is just this idea of, on some level, you know, I always want to kind of get away from myself, and I love the idea of melting, you know, kind of disappearing into actions, disappearing into a greater picture. I mean, I think this thing that holds us back creatively has to do with identity and an inflexibility of identity. So when you find the tools, or people give you the tools to leave yourself behind and take a leap into another circumstance, that's what's really rich, and that's what you know you can really live, and that's when you feel very turned on and engaged. And I always look for that, and the only way you can do that is kind of forget about yourself and kind of find your place in this group effort. So I guess that's basically the idea of being a color, being an instrument in a whole swirl of color, and that you know connects with the idea in Van Gogh. I studied with him to learn how to paint. It was a practical thing because there's a lot of painting in the movie, and we didn't have a stunt painter, so I had to have some feeling for making marks and seeing how the accumulation of marks create movement, and how one mark talks to another mark, talks to another mark, and then something flows. And that's sort of like the acting process. One action leads to another action, leads to another action, and the character is revealed through those, how you feel those actions. So that Van Gogh movie was very interesting because in learning how to paint, it not only rooted the character for me and made me not worry about Kirk Douglas or any of the previous, because that's not what we're doing. We're doing this thing about this guy that has this certain feelings about painting and certain ways of seeing. And to have a shift, to see in a different way by learning how to paint, that really opened the door and made me understand better some of the things that I read from his extensive letters and certain biographies, and there's a lot of material on Van Gogh. So when I learned to paint, that kind of unlocked the key to those things.
On va montrer la clip de Eternity's Gate, qui est la 4e dans l'ordre. On a sauté à une, on va revenir en arrière, mais on va montrer la clip de Eternity's Gate pour illustrer ce que Willem venait de dire jusque maintenant.
I remember the painting looking better than that. No, but that was scary because for a long time it looks very bad, but then it kind of comes together. So.
But there is a lot of tiny details in this moment. I mean, the way you move your hands as if you were following the kind of music only you could hear, it goes, in my opinion, beyond the fact that you were trying to portray a very famous painter. It looks to me as if you were following something very specific that was going on in your head, and the way the hands are moving, this kind of tiny symphony with your hands, it's very moving because it's as if your hands were portraying what was going on in your head emotionally, not only intellectually. So if you could elaborate a bit on that.
I'll try. You know, I was really struck that, okay, Julian would talk about making a mark at a time. And he also, the thing that was very useful, he always would talk about, don't rush to see the thing. Look at the light. Look at the light. What do you really see? Look at that dark part. Look at that light part. So what you're doing is you're having a kind of play with perception, or at least that's what I was trying to do, where you're not saying, oh, I'm going to paint that bottle. The bottle looks like this, so I'm going to draw and make a likeness. I don't care about that. I'm trying to reach out to find, you know, to be on the same line as that bottle, to be in that same place, to be in the same swirl as that bottle exists. And the way to do that is to see it in terms that aren't immediately recognizable, where you take kind of the things that emanates from it, almost an energy, and you look at the light. So you don't think about making the shape of the bottle so much as you see that cloudy part. I'm looking at this bottle now, that cloudy part. I'm going to try to feel what that is, and then I see this blue part. And it kind of breaks down and gets you to someplace else and makes you re-see. So when you're thinking like that, the world opens up to you because you see beyond and you see the origin of things. And I think if you read Van Gogh's letters, they're very moving. I mean, he's a guy that lives in the spirit. And that was sort of the whole point, that his work was an expression of his spiritual longing to be, to realize himself.
I would just stay a moment longer on this element, because as you were now describing these two things, that there were obviously something that is very pragmatic, so we need to do something, but on the other hand, there's a very specific elaboration of what is going on, and this balance between the pragmatic and the emotional or the spiritual, as you described it, is very interesting, because if you get too much of one or the other of these elements, the scene doesn't work. So is there a music that you listen to when you know this is going in the right way, or I have to change something when you are on set and you are aware the camera is rolling? Is there something that tells you, in a way, if it's working, or you have to wait for that?
I don't worry about that. I worry about the quality of being there, I think. And that's why a strong director is so important. Because if you give yourself to, if you try to give yourself to that kind of way of being, then somebody's got to make sure that it's framed correctly and keep you on track. So I'm not, but it's true, what you describe. I mean, I always think about all performing is, you know, happens somewhere between this place of total control and another place of total abandon. And you, depending on what we're trying to accomplish, you know, you have to go between those two poles. And sometimes you go towards abandon, and then you have to correct by getting some craft or control, and vice versa.
You were... I hope that aspiring directors are taking note, because this is not only about acting, this is especially about directing. So you mentioned strong directors. There is, and you worked over and over again with some of the directors with whom you made some of your most iconic work. And I would love to speak about a bit about Paul Schrader. You did what is, I mean, in my opinion, one of your most beautiful films, The Light Sleeper. Okay. And before we go into that, I would love to show a moment from that film, which explores a completely different side of your acting craft. On peut montrer la clip de light sleeper. Merci. I mean, this is an amazing film. This scene specifically, every time I see it, I get extremely emotional. But I mean, Paul Schrader, as you said, is one of those people that you can describe as a very strong director, and you worked with him over and over again. And this is obviously one of the moments that struck him as a cinephile, as a film lover, because this is the ending of Pickpocket by Bresson. How did he speak to you about this? And because this is one of the moments that he goes back over and over again. And what was the build-up to get to this point?
Yeah, Paul's a writer above all, I think, and he feels like he does a lot of his work in the writing and in the casting. And I remember for this film specifically, halfway through, he said, I thought, the guy never talks to me. We just do the scene. He never talks to me. I don't know how I'm doing. I felt kind of rudderless, And about 2 days later, he said, hey, listen, I don't talk to you much, but you're doing fine. So that was his direction. But that's not a complaint, because what he gives you is, he gives you a lot in the writing. He gives you a lot in the world. And it's just a case of he lets you go. He feels like he does it in casting. And the thing about this character, that came in a certain time where I felt like doesn't necessarily have anything to do with this scene in particular, but I thought, this could be me. This character could be me if my life was different. So it was a rare case where I was playing a role that I felt like I was not close to an experience, but that could have been my life if different things had happened to me. So there was something very dear about it, and it was a very New York City movie, and it was very elegiac, because this character is a white-collar drug dealer, and that was kind of in a period where AIDS was happening, and a certain kind of malaise in New York started to come into play.
This is also a film where you play almost like a blank wall to the other people, because there are lots of scenes when you go to people, bring in their drugs, and they speak to you, and you don't say anything. There's just the other shot on you while you are listening to it. And there's this silent counterpart that you had to play, which is extremely detailed. I mean, how do you articulate silence when you are just being the counterpart to someone that is talking to you, and you have to show what's going inside of you, but you don't reply? And this film is a very specific example of that.
I don't think you think about what's going inside of you. You listen to them. Yeah, and you go in and out of that, I think. And for this film, like anything else, what helped me to prepare is to, learn about that trade, learn about that world, be in that world for a little bit. So that's what I did. So, yeah, it was just this leap of imagining I could do this. This could be my life. And I guess those moments when I'm falling out of listening, I'm having a dialogue with myself about how close or how far away am I from all this. I don't know.
No, that's extremely precise, the way you described it. And when you say very New York kind of thing, there's another director with whom you, over the years, have created a bond, a director that is deemed controversial to some, a genius to others, Abel Ferrara, obviously. And you made one of his most interesting films in Rome, because you're also an Italian citizen now. And how did you work with Abel on something like Tommaso? You worked before with Go-Go Tales and so on. And for the record, you are one of the declared fans of his interview on Conan O'Brien.
Abel's a friend. I've worked with him many, many times. And this movie, Jonah's referring to, Tommaso, I don't know how many of you have seen it, but it was an interesting movie to me because it was basically improvised. And normally, I think there's a big misunderstanding about improvisation for actors because, I don't know, it turns them into writers and that turns them into being clever people and that sort of thing. So again, I find improvisation sometimes can be very self-serving and very self-conscious. And actors, if they're good enough, they can hide that, but somewhere you feel it deeply. The nice thing about this is Abel, because I felt quite close to him and there were elements of autobiography on his part in this movie. He would basically tell me a story and then tell me about something that happened, and then we would try to enact the scene. No rehearsal, very little. And I was also performing with people that weren't normally actors, like his daughter, his young daughter, and his partner, the mother of the daughter, and also people on the street. So that was interesting because you had just to roll with it, and the situation told you where the scene had to go. There's one beautiful scene where he told me about a homeless guy was downstairs, and he was keeping his daughter awake because he was screaming, ranting every night.
We had selected that clip, but
Oh,
then for time-wise, we cut it out.
Oh, okay. But imagine this. I'm in the actual building. We had a very, Peter Zeitlinger, who works a lot with, a DP who works a lot with Herzog, was very fluid camera. It was almost, I love working with the camera. He was like invisible. He was like Jiminy Cricket on my shoulder. I mean, he was there, but I didn't feel him, you know? Very fluid, very capable. Well, I'm in this apartment, like 5 stories up. We know what the scene is. I look out, I see the guy. I've never met this guy before, and he's a homeless guy in real life. And I scream at him. Then I run down, go to the elevator, and it's a small Italian elevator. And the camera goes there in with me. It goes down. I go out the door. I go there. I confront him. I don't know what's going to happen. And he's loaded. He's drunk. I don't know whether he's going to hit me. I don't know what's going to happen. But the scene kind of was a real encounter between these two people. And something beautiful happened, that's all. And the movie was full of that, just these kind of situations that were set up, that were rooted in reality because we didn't know what we had to accomplish, but we knew what the basic setup was. And then we'd kind of let it roll. I'm not happy with how I'm describing this, but what's that?
It's like a documentary movie, kind of.
It's like a documentary movie.
A little bit. Yeah, I guess.
Tommaso was intertwined with Siberia, which was a completely different movie, which was scripted, it had a storyboard, it had an internal and external journey, and those two films are pretty much having a dialogue, very strong dialogue.
I think that's true. I'm not sure how many people have seen those movies, so it's hard to reference it. But yes, they've got an interesting relationship. Because with Abel, it's a true collaboration. It's very fluid, and that's one of the reasons why I like to work with him.
In Tommaso, and then we move on, there is a scene where Abel references the last temptation of Christ, and also the people love that movie. So, and my question is, when you took on that role, it was, let's say, early on in your career, and we know that people say once you take that role, your career is over, like it happened for lots of people, Jeffrey Hunter, and so on. And what was the reason? They said, I can do that, I can do this, I can survive it, and even though it came back later on. I mean, Abel is clearly a great fan of that film,
Right, and
which was written by Paul Schrader.
Yes, I was totally against this idea of having this reference in Tommaso, but he felt he needed it, so I said, okay. But I think it works fine. Well, are you going to show a clip of that?
No.
Oh, okay. It's all right. That's
So
okay.
you can speak about it. So you can speak about it.
No, it was interesting because that was slightly different, but it was cool, and it was more like a piece of performance art. And the fact that we were outside Termini Station in Rome, which is quite a busy train station, and we erected these three basically crosses and got up on there with our clothes on and just sat up there, and people walked by, and that was it. That's the way we approached it. But things do happen when you break people's routine. So it functions.
And this brings me to one of your things that I've heard over and over in your interviews, when you say that you need to do some cleansing from one role to the other, and especially...
I'm surprised at that, but go ahead.
Because you were speaking in relation to the Lighthouse and how Edward Norton approached you in doing Motherless Brooklyn, and that you felt a bit pressured because you didn't have enough time in cleansing yourself from one role to the other. So the question is, I did that wrong. I got that wrong?
To my mind, yes, but that's not bad. I mean, you have a right to think that, but I don't relate to that so much because I feel like when I finish something, it's finished, because the situation really allows you to become. And once that's gone, wherever that stuff comes from, there's nothing to support it unless you willingly, support it. It's true, if you're painting 24 hours a day, you don't just forget painting the next day, so things linger. But there's often this perception that you get into this character and then you have to withdraw from it. I feel like you arrive at that character only when the situation, you come to you're born of this moment, and it's not something that you sustain unless you really try to afterwards. So I don't mean to, maybe, I mean, that's fair to think that. I don't know what I said that made you think that, but I don't relate to that so much.
Okay, because this was one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, how you move from so many different characters, and some of them are clearly a true emotional journey, and some are less engaging.
Yeah. It's like, look, we all do it. We go to the doctor's office, and then we go shopping, and then we go see friends, and then we have dinner. They're different situations, and you become different people for those different situations. It's a little bit like that.
Okay, before we move on for some couple of questions from the audience, I would love to ask you about the film Finalmente l'alba, Finally the Dawn, by Saverio Costanzo, which is your first fully Italian language film, and which was presented in Venice, and which is quite amazing because you almost don't have an accent. So besides living in Rome and so on, how was that experience?
It was good, but I struggle with Italian, so it was an extra challenge. But I do play an American character, but I'm translating between the Italian characters and the American characters, so I had to have a certain kind of confidence and authority. But I just practiced a lot and got some help. But it's a nice role because he's kind of a helper. He doesn't take up much space, but he's part of the action.
I hope that you, if you haven't yet, but you hope that you will see this film. It's quite an amazing film, and WILLEM is wonderful in it. So, yeah, we have time for a couple of questions from the audience here. This was very quick. I was just waiting for it. Le monsieur là, dans le deuxième rang.
Hi. First of all, I don't think I have a very interesting question, but when we have this kind of chances, we don't have to miss it. I like your performance in the movie The Lighthouse. Are Marvels enjoyable as much as this kind of movies for you as an actor?
Novels?
Marvels, like Spider-Man.
You know, they're different. They call on different things. There's different pleasures, different challenges. You know, part of your job is when you get there is to make it interesting for yourself, you know, and to contribute something. And I think that I like to mix it up because it keeps you from a certain kind of corruption and a certain kind of hardening of a certain way of being. And it makes you always consider other ways, that's all. So Marvel, independent movies, yes, they're different, definitely different. But you can do both. You can do both. Yeah. Oh my God, there will be lots of disappointed people in this room when this is over. The second row still there. Yes, the gentleman avec les lunettes.
Hello. Does it work? Okay. Before I ask my question, I would like to say I'm a huge fan, and it's an honor to be here and to see you and to finally meet you after, as someone who grew up with like the Spider-Man movies. I was kind of scared of you as a kid.
Sorry. It's my job.
Yeah, I know. I would like to ask you, as someone who's been in many eras of filmmaking, who's done a lot of different films of many different kinds of movies, what is an era of filmmaking from the past, or something, or a type of movie that you would have liked to have done and that you haven't done yet? I don't know if the question makes a lot of sense when I say it.
No, it makes. I hear this question. I don't think about that so much because I don't have that kind of imagination. When I think of something and it takes shape, and I think I like that, it completes itself. And an important thing is for me, I find more and more, particularly as I get older, I enjoy going towards something that I don't know. And that's where the pleasure is. But to think, oh, I really would love to play Robinson Crusoe, you know? Okay, as soon as I say it, it's like I've done it. It's a weird thing. It's probably maybe why I'm not a director too, because if I saw something, I saw it. And you may want to share it, but then it's a lot of work and a lot of craft just to get it up there. And that doesn't interest me so much as the experience of becoming or going towards something. And, I guess on some level I'm interested in, being freer and being, and having experiences that broaden my sense of the world and the sense of my life and lessen the fear. I think that's basically why I do what I do.
La fille dans le troisième rang.
First of all, I just wanted to quickly say I followed your career since I was really young. It's such an honor to see you in real life.
Thank you.
So what's your greatest accomplishment as an actor so far?
One thing I'm happy with is I still like doing it. And that's about the best thing I can say.
Hi, good morning. Do you ever question the motives of the characters that you play? Why is he doing, and does that bother you?
All the time. I mean, in the same way that we question ourselves, and judge ourselves. But not judge them in the sense of, you know, it's really true. I mean, you've heard it a lot, but you've got to create a relationship to these people and be compassionate with them and try to get a full picture. And not to show that, but have a feeling for that, so there's some truth to what you're doing, some thing that's not invented and isn't just, you know, discovery is very important. And you can't discover if you decide or you judge a character immediately, because then you're just, you know, presenting one side. So you try to find a place to surprise yourself.
Mr. Willem Dafoe, this is a great honor to see you in person.
Thank you.
I have just two questions. The one that many people don't ask you.
He says you've got one.
Oh, one, just one. I choose the most important one.
Okay.
What is your comment about the short film Michael Jackson Bad, directed by Martin Scorsese? Because many fans don't know the Wanted for Sacrilege poster is linked to your movie.
Wait a second. What?
The Wanted for Sacrilege poster, it says Wanted, Scorsese's picture on the on the video, and Michael rips that thing because he defends your movie. He defended your movie, and billions of fans around the world don't know that Scorsese directed Bad because it was cut to 4 minutes.
Yes.
And he financed also, I think, your movie also because Scorsese didn't have the financing from Universal, so you suffered a lot to do the movie. And Thelma Schoonmaker, the editor, is from Algeria. Does she speak Arabic? Did she translate to you when you were in Morocco? So, I mean, this is just a side question. You don't have to answer it.
That was entertaining, but I have nothing to say. But, yeah. You're a wealth of information.
La dame avec la robe rose.
Okay. Thank you. Great, thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
And I am very, very happy because I talk with you first. It's very amazing for me because I see in the movie, to the Joker, you look like a violent guy, but in the real life, I see you are the good person. And my question is, yeah.
Thank you, we try.
Is, what is the different I don't know what I say because I am very happy to talk with you. The different direction for the young people want to become star people, for actor, for actress, girl, for become like you. And what is you say for the future, for do what they do, for become like you? What is the directive they'll follow for become like you?
So like advice.
Yes.
Advice.
Thank you so much.
You know,
Merci.
no, it's great. Thank you. You know, I'm not, you know, everybody has to find their own way. But the one thing that's always true is, you know, I say don't wait. Don't wait for the situation to get better and have an excuse to say, I can't do this yet because I need to be here. Start doing, and then through trial and error, that'll make a path for you. And always do what you love. And don't do this to get that. Always do this to do this. And that's about the only advice that stays with me and I hope is useful. I mean, you'll find out what you need to do. It can't come from someone else, really.
There's so many. I'm going to disappoint a lot of people. That lady who was quicker than anybody else back there. I'm just human. I make lots of mistakes.
Hello. Mr. Dafoe. Hello. An absolute honor to speak before you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Earlier, of your character of Van Gogh, you said that it was, pardon me, it's not going to be exactly verbatim, but his work was a spiritual expression of what was inside of himself. Where and how in your work is it a spiritual expression of what's inside yourself?
You know, when you do something, we're going back to doing actions. The way that you do it, it's not what you do, it's how you do it. And the kind of attention you give it, and the kind of how you're activated, how present you are. I mean, that's what you try to maintain. And the more you can connect those dots, it's just like making the marks that speak to each other. And after a while, they start to sing. Well, hopefully, if you can connect those dots in a concentrated and open-hearted way, then, you know, in that action, you'll be in life. You'll be in life. It won't be canned. It won't be dead. And you'll be, you know, you'll be here. And that's about as good as it can get.
Last question. The gentleman right there, gray jacket. Yes.
Yeah. First of all, I wanted to say thank you for all of your inspiring work.
Thank you.
And my question is, as an actor, you get approached by a lot of filmmakers, directors with pitches for new scripts and movies. And I was just wondering, especially as a young filmmaker, what's the craziest pitch kind of you said yes to? You were like, that sounds... and I would still do it, you know?
Damn. Let me get back to you on that. No, really, nothing comes to mind right away. Damn, I don't know. I'm sorry. If I think of it, I'll tell you. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay.
See, she's not waiting.
First of all, before the question, I'm so happy to be here around, okay, I lost use of words, but I watched the Spider-Man movie very young, and I discovered for the first time I don't like the hero. I mean, I do like the hero, but...
You like the Goblin.
I'm more into villains when it comes to any show, but because of Green Goblin that I discovered that I love villains, and I'm just intrigued to know like what's their backstory, why are they villains, what happened to them. So I mean, in Spider-Man they showed why he became the Green Goblin. My question is, how does it feel like to be oh my god, like I forgot the exact word, I'm so sorry.
Let me speak to the thing about like how does it feel to play villains and what's attractive about it? No. Yeah? Let's try that. Let's try that.
Sure.
You know, I grow up, I'm an American, I'm a middle class kid, you know, all that kind of thing. And I think I've always been attracted to people on the margin because they tell the stories that we don't hear, or they see the world in a way that I didn't know. And there's always a wisdom towards going to other people's stories or other people's experience. So when you play a villain, I'm not a villain, I'm a sweetheart, you know? So to go to that place is always interesting and kind of broadens your view of what's possible and morality, and it opens you up, I think.
Okay, there's a plane that Willem needs to catch, so thank you all for being here, and most of all, thank you.
Grazie.